with a brief summary of our resilience workshop as part of our life skills program. Before I do, I'd like to say thank you very much to the people who attended our workshop. You were a fantastic group of people, and it was really a pleasure to work with you. For those that were unable to attend, I hope that this summary will give you some idea of what the workshop about, but the real knowledge gained was through the experiential learning during the workshop and with the group of wonderful people that were sitting around you. So I really appreciate those who came. Thank you. In terms of the resilience workshop, one of the key factors was that we were looking for a small mindset shift in order to implement change in our lives. The workshop aimed to provide participants with some tools and methodology to reduce the effects of apathy and to build some resilience. We had a contract for working together which covered areas such as respect, participation, confidentiality, and timing. We started by building trust with a small exercise done in the group. We then went on to focus on ourselves as human beings, and we saw that humans are capable of both good and evil, and that human beings possess incredible strengths and abilities, and our bodies and minds are an array of enormous functions. We hope to use this in order to be able to beat apathy. I know that you'll remember people who wanted a swimming pool could know now that the average person will create enough saliva to fill 2 of them. And humans are also the only species that are known to blush. More importantly, though, we concentrated on our brain as being the greatest weapon against apathy. It's much more powerful than the world's fastest supercomputer, and this is what we wanted to use. We focused on the fact that we're actually in charge of our own thinking, and in changing our thinking in some way, we can change our lives. Life is 10% of what happens to you and 90% of how you respond to it. Therefore, our responses are really, really important. And if we decide that we're in charge of how we feel, we can choose whatever feeling we wish to have. We did an exercise where people concentrated on a time in their life when they were happy, and agreed also to look at the possibility of when you wake up each morning, decide that you'll be in good humor and try to have a good day. It's a decision that you can make. We also looked at what happens to people when labels are placed upon them, and we discussed the story of Miriam, a Syrian woman who had been labeled as a Syrian woman, and the subsequent consequences of that, where she had no choice. When she came to Ireland, the label changed to an asylum seeker, but that still had a lot of consequences for Miriam in her life. We focused on the fact of saying it's very easy to say choose to be happy, but how can somebody in Miriam's situation do this? And we looked at the resilience that people like Miriam and that us as human beings have actually built up in our lifetimes to enable us to cope with some of the situations we find ourselves in. Unfortunately, I can't play the music videos that we used due to copyright limitations, but the links are available to you. We choose the song from Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat of Close Every Door to Me in order to be able to focus on Miriam and people like her where doors are closed to them, yet they manage to respond in a positive way and to get on with their lives. We focused on resilience, and what is it? Well, resilience is the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or significant sources of stress, such as family, relationship problems, serious health problems, or workplace or financial stressors. It really means bouncing back from difficult experiences. Research has shown that resilience is ordinary, not extraordinary, and that people commonly demonstrate resilience. You don't have to have been in a horrific situation in order to demonstrate resilience. We have it in our everyday lives. it's not a trait that people either have or do not have. It involves behaviors, thoughts, and actions that can be learned and developed in anyone. We use the example of the funeral for the goldfish in the Galty cheese box to show how we begin to build resilience in our children by teaching them about life events in a simplified format so that when the real event comes along, they're better able to cope. We then did an exercise using a mandala, which was colouring in a repetitive pattern and listening to some music at the same time. When we're planning a change, we sometimes think too hard about the changes and we can become frustrated that the answers won't come immediately. So it's very useful to let your brain relax by listening to some music or colouring in a pattern. Your brain will continue working in the background and think about the change. The answers will come eventually. While colouring the mandala, we concentrated on the resilience we have built up ourselves in our lives and listened to a piece of music called Something Inside So Strong. Then we moved on to looking at apathy and what it was. It's quite difficult to explain, but in a sense, it's something like falling in love. You can describe it all you want, but until you have experienced it, you can only guess what it feels like. Paradoxically, what makes the feeling of apathy unique is that it's essentially the feeling of not feeling. In a sense, it's like a computer virus. It can sneak in and open itself up, but it uses you to beat yourself up. In terms of dealing with apathy, there are many practical things you can do, but you won't be able to do any of them unless you change your mindset. Regardless of what initially caused you to feel so unmotivated, it's your present day outlook on it that now keeps you stuck. Remember, life is only 10% of what happens to you, but 90% of your attitude towards it. So, in order to beat apathy, you have to change your perspective. You have to alter your outlook. In short, it's much better off focusing on how to fix what's inside your head than on what lies outside it. And there's no question but you'll need to force yourself to do this in order to uproot what's already taken residence deep inside you. We looked at the possibility of change, and we did an exercise where we found that, okay, from crossing and uncrossing our legs, it wasn't that difficult, but it was a lot more difficult when it came to folding and unfolding our arms. So change really is uncomfortable at first, but if we practice it, it can become routine. And the purpose of the workshop is to give you some tools to encourage practicing change so that it becomes the new routine that you desire. What you need to do is determine where your apathy is coming from and contest its underlying assumptions. Since apathy is fundamentally about attitude, you need to begin to look at yourself and your history from a different perspective. We asked you to write one thing that irritated you. It can be the simplest thing that other people do. And then we asked you to think about a really difficult one, was to write down one thing that you feel you failed at. And the most important part here was to forgive yourself for that, to move away from the perceived failures of the past and look to the future. And in beating apathy, it's really, really important to look forward. We need to make a transition from passivity to problem solving. Again, we asked people to write down one thing that they'd like to change, but then we asked to look at what does success look like, and to answer the question that 100% success means I will feel what? And then to look at what impact that feeling will have on your life. This allows us to focus on what's called outcome-based planning. The important element in relation to outcome-based planning is we focus on the outcome rather than the output. For example, if I wanted to give up cigarettes, the output would be giving up cigarettes. The outcome from that would be that I could feel much healthier and could live longer. Regardless of whether my plan to give up cigarettes succeeds or not, I can change from plan A to plan B to plan C as long as I continue to focus on the outcome and that all my plans are geared towards that. In order to do that, we began to do what was called a SWOT analysis, which looks at our strengths, our weaknesses, the opportunities and the threats that exist for us. The examples we gave here are internal strengths such as resilience, an internal weakness such as maybe bad habits that we've developed. Externally, we looked at some of the opportunities, and perhaps we belong to a network of friends or a group that we're part of. And looking at threats, and the main threat we found here was the threat of apathy. Again, in thinking about our strengths, we did a reflective exercise by listening to a piece of music by M People, which focused on the strengths that we have, and we wanted to concentrate on a strengths-based approach. In terms of using your strengths, if you focus on the outcome, and the outcome is really there because, you know, you are worth it, well then some of the strengths that you can use would be your strength to make a choice. You can make choices about what you do and how you feel. Your creativity. You have the ability to be creative. Try to do something new or explore new ways of solving a problem. The strength of considering. Give yourself time for some reflection. A very short time will do, but think about the successes that you've had. It's also really important that we celebrate and that we treat ourselves and be kind to ourselves. We would do that for others, so why not do it for yourself? Everybody was given a little shot glass with a coin. Have you been filling it with coins since? Have you treated yourself yet? Go on, go celebrate. Then we looked at the plan. And we did it in the form of a table where the first column looked at what change do you want to make. The example we gave was beating apathy. The outcome, what does 100% success look like? Again, from the example, would be that I will lose that helpless feeling. The impact, what effect will this have in our lives? My life will be, and that of those around me, will be happier. Then focusing on the strengths. What strengths will I use? For example, my resilience, my power to choose, my creativity. In terms of weaknesses, we felt it was important to pick on one weakness at a time to work on. An example here could be putting things off until the last minute. Then what we began to do was to formulate a very simple daily plan. For example, choosing to feel good, going for a short walk, put the coins in a cup. They're very, very simple things. They take little or no time, and if you practice them regularly, they can actually have a good effect. Then we moved on to looking at a weekly plan. Pick things that you like doing. Maybe cook a nice meal for yourself. Reflect on some of the success you've had. Watch a film, listen to music. Then we moved into a monthly plan where, for example, it was doing something new, reading a book, buying a gift for yourself. We felt it was really important to evaluate what was happening, and in order to do that, it's useful to highlight your achievements so that you can monitor your progress. In our example, it could be that I felt good on so many occasions. I went for 4 walks, I met deadlines. Whatever it is, it's important to acknowledge your achievements because this will encourage you to keep going with your plan. The final part was just a summary of the workshop, where we looked at the fact that you were born as a human, people labelled you, and that had consequences. It's important that we choose our own label. It's important that we change our perspective on things. It's important that we use our strengths in order to implement change. And it's really important that we look back to our inner child and we release that inner child. Because for us as small children, the sky was the limit. Nothing was impossible. If we can get back to that way of thinking, we can certainly achieve any change that we would like to implement, and it would help us to raise ourselves up. The final part of the workshop was looking at just a motivational piece of music from two young children who really, for them, the sky was the limit. And I think you'll all remember the emotional value of